President Donald Trump and Democratic challengers Joe Biden have one last chance to make their case to voters in critical battleground states. The final full day of a campaign that has laid bare their dramatically different visions for tackling the nation's pressing problems and for the office of the presidency itself. The candidates are seeking to lead a nation at a crossroads, gripped by a historic pandemic that is raging anew in nearly every corner of the country and a reckoning over race. More than 93 million people have already voted, and it could take longer than usual for elections officials to process the historic surge in early and mail-in ballots. Both campaigned insist they have a pathway to victory, though Biden's options for picking up the required 270 electoral college votes are more plentiful. Trump is banking on a surge of enthusiasm from his most loyal supporters while also threatening legal action to stop vote counting in some crucial states, including Pennsylvania. Heading into the closing hours, Trump and Biden each painted the other as unfit for office and described the next 4 years in near-apocalyptic terms if the other were to win. Germany imposed a 4-week partial shutdown, with restaurants, bars, theaters, cinemas and other leisure facilities closing down until the end of the month in a drive to flatten a rapid rise in coronavirus infections. The restrictions that took effect Monday are milder than the ones Germany imposed in the first phase of the pandemic in March and April. This time around, schools, kindergartens, non-essential shops and hairdressers are to remain open. But leading officials decided last week that a lockdown light was necessary in light of a sharp rise in cases that has prompted many other European countries to impose more or less drastic restrictions. Germany has reported over 100 new cases per 100,000 residents over the past week. That is fewer than in many other European countries, but far above 50 mark that officials said earlier this year as an alarm signal that requires action by local authorities. The head of the World Health Organization says he will undergo self-quarantine after being in contact with a person tested positive for COVID-19. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus wrote on Twitter late Sunday that he is well and without symptoms but will self-quarantine in coming days in line with WHO protocols and work from home. On Monday, the UN health agencies sought to dispel misinformation about Tedros' self-isolation, writing on Twitter that contrary to some incorrect reports, he has not tested positive himself. The WHO Director General has been at the forefront of the global response to the coronavirus pandemic, which has infected at least 46.5 million people and led to more than 1.2 million deaths. The tweet did not identify who among his contacts had been infected. The UN Health Agency is based in Geneva, where cases are increasing and where tighter restrictions were announced Sunday aimed to curb the spread of the virus. More than 1,000 new cases have been recorded each day recently in an area of about 500,000 people. Officials at WHO Europe in Copenhagen, however, regularly wear masks during their weekly news conferences in an effort to send a signal to viewers on the importance of precautions measures. Gunmen stormed Kabul University as it hosted a book fair attended by the Iranian ambassador to Afghanistan. It sparked an hours-long gun battle and leaving at least 19 dead and 22 wounded at the war-torn country's largest school. The ministry's spokesman, Tariq Aryan, also said there were 3 attackers involved in the assault, all of whom were killed in the ensuing firefight. There were a few other details through the Taliban issued a statement denying they took part in the assault. The attack came as the insurgents are continuing peace talks with the US-backed government. Those negotiations, taking place in the Gulf Arab state of Qatar, aim to help the US finally withdraw from America's longest war, though daily bloodshed continues and an Islamic State affiliate launches its own attack on Shiites in the country. No group immediately took responsibility for the ongoing attack, though the Taliban issued a statement saying they were not involved. However, suspicions immediately fell on the Islamic State group. Italian Premier Giuseppe Conte has announced new national restrictions aimed at halting the increase of coronavirus cases. The restrictions involves closing shopping malls on the weekends, shuttering museums, and limiting movements between regions. Conte outlined the new measures to lawmakers ahead of a new decree expected soon. He said shopping malls will be closed on weekends except for food stores, newsstands, drugstores, and tobacco shops located inside. He also announced the closure of gambling parlors and video game arcades. He added that there will be late evening curfew, but without providing a time. Currently, only some regions involving Lazio, where Rome is located, have a curfew. He also said high schools, which are currently on 3/4 distance learning, can go on full-time distance learning in a bid to help elevate pressures on public transport. Conte told lawmakers on that one big difference this time compared to measures during the virus last peak in March. Some measures will vary by region depending on how critical the virus spread is and pressure on hospitals.
Britain is taking back control of its nuclear weapons. Since 1999, the warheads for the submarine-based deterrent have been maintained by a US-led consortium. Defence giant Lockheed Martin owns just over half of that. British firms Serco and Jacobs Engineering of the US share the rest. Now London says it is ending the arrangement earlier than expected. It says that will have benefits including better value for money for taxpayers. Serco says it was told about the termination late Friday. On Monday, its shares tumbled around 13%. Based in Aldermaston and Burfield in southern England, the atomic weapons establishment has long been a focus for anti-nuclear protests. It develops and maintains the warheads that are fitted to the UK's Trident missiles. Sky News, which first reported the story, said it wasn't clear if the companies would be compensated for early termination of the 25-year contract.
A manhunt is underway for several suspected perpetrators of what the Austrian government is calling a terror attack in Vienna after gunmen fired shots at 6 locations on Monday, starting near the city's central synagogue, killing at least one person and wounding several others. Austria's chancellor said on Twitter, quote, "Police will take decisive action against the perpetrators of this hideous terrorist attack." The country's interior minister called the attackers, quote, "heavily armed and dangerous." Police said on Twitter that at least one person had been killed and several were injured, including a police officer. Vienna's mayor said that 15 people were being treated in hospitals and that 7 were in serious condition. Police also said that they had shot and killed one of the attackers. Authorities gave no indication of the identity of the assailants or a reason for the attack. Jewish community leader Oscar Deutsch said on Twitter that it was not clear whether the Vienna synagogue and adjoining offices had been the target of the attack, and said they were closed at the time. In recent years, Austria has been spared the sort of large-scale attacks seen in Paris, Berlin, and London. President Emmanuel Macron of France, which has seen 2 deadly knife attacks in Paris and Nice in recent weeks, issued a statement on Twitter expressing shock and sorrow, saying, quote, "This is our Europe. Our enemies need to know who they are dealing with. We won't give in to anything."
Manufacturing growth in the Eurozone boomed in October, but there's one country that can take most of the credit. Dragging the Eurozone economy out of severely depressed activity was again mostly driven by a buoyant Germany. IHS Markit's final manufacturing purchasing managers index climbed to 54.8. That was its highest reading since July 2018. Anything above 50 indicates growth. The news helped European stocks gain on Monday, with the regional Stoxx 600 index up around 1.5% by early afternoon. But economists still see trouble ahead. One told Reuters that Germany has done spectacularly well over recent months, but as the lockdowns begin to impact not only on Germany but its main export market, it will take the edge off the recovery. Analysts found other worries in Monday's data too. A flash reading of the overall survey showed activity in the bloc's dominant service sector contracted last month as a second wave of the virus swept across Europe. Germany and France, the bloc's 2 biggest economies, have again imposed tough lockdown measures. The move will deal a further heavy blow this month as restaurants, gyms and shops are forced to close. German factories saw record growth in new orders in October, but the country has recently imposed controls almost as strict as the lockdowns of the first phase of the crisis. That suggests at least some manufacturing activity might be curtailed.
China's factories are roaring back into life. Data out Monday showed activity in the sector expanding at its fastest pace in almost a decade. The Caixin Market Manufacturing PMI rose to 53.6 in October, beating forecasts and well above the key 50-point line that indicates growth. That adds to evidence that the country's vast industrial sector is getting back to pre-crisis levels. The gains were driven by a surge in domestic demand. Stimulus-driven infrastructure spending and surprisingly strong exports also helped. But there are still some warning signs flickering. Though the index for new orders hit its highest since 2010, the figure for export orders fell. That as the US and Europe face renewed health battles. On Monday, though, investors were happy to focus on the positives. The PMI numbers helped Asian stocks gain. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index closed the day almost 1.5% higher. The gains then carried over into Europe, where benchmark indexes all started the day in positive territory.